And we are live. Hello, friends. I, Sarah Rahaman Shaikh, project lead for the Story Project 14 by www.tellmeyourstory.biz, welcome you to the second episode of Echoes and Whispers series. It intends to explore various noises and conversations emerging from our external hemispheres. Tell Me Your Story calls for submission on the theme inviting people to interpret it in their own creative ways. Registrations are also open for a host of workshops for new and aspiring authors. This evening or morning, depending on your respective time zones, I am extremely privileged to have with us today Dr. Mikel Burley, Mr. Loyd Auerbach, and Mr. Shinjan Ghosh. Tonight, we are going to discuss the fascinating intricacies about dreams, hypnosis, and reincarnations, and all about mysteries, scars, and the unknown truths. Let me begin with introducing our first panelist of the panel discussion, Dr. Mikel Burley. Dr. Mikel Burley is an associate professor of religion and philosophy at the University of Leeds, UK. His publications include A Radical Pluralist, Philosophy of Religion, Cross-Cultural Multi-Religious Interdisciplinary by Bloomsbury in 2020, and Rebirth and the Stream of Life, a philosophical study of reincarnation, karma, and Ethics by Bloomsbury in 2016. He is currently working on a book on the uses of narrative sources in philosophy of religion. Welcome, sir. We are immensely delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
A second panelist of the session is Mr. Loyd Auerbach. Mr. Loyd Auerbach has completed Master of Science, has 44 years experience in parapsychology as an educator, field investigator, author, speaker, and media personality. He is director of the Office of Paranormal Investigations, president of the Forever Family Foundation, president of the board of directors of the Rhine Research Center, and an adjunct professor at Atlantic University. Additionally, he is a panelist performing as Professor Paranormal. Welcome, sir. We are truly glad to be today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Our third panelist is Mr. Shinjan Ghosh. Mr. Shinjan Ghosh is RCI licensed clinical psychologist attached to the Mind Buddies and NSG Kolkata. He is also an assistant professor at Adamas University and PhD scholar at University of Calcutta with over 5 years of experience in mental health. His research interests are in psycho-oncology, clinical psychology, disability, and acceptance of therapy. He is a founder of a budding mental health platform, Your Own Therapist, and author of over 12 works in international journals and books. Welcome, sir. We are immensely blessed to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be one of this, be a part of this wonderful panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to take the opportunity first common question of our panel discussion. How can the exploration of dreams, hypnosis, and reincarnation contribute to consciousness and the potential existence of life beyond death? Mikel, sir, you may begin first.
Thanks very much. Well, I come at this from a sort of philosophical and anthropological angle. And so one of the things that interests me most about these phenomena is what they reveal about the variety of ways of being human and different perspectives that different cultures and people throughout history have upon life in general and upon what happens to us beyond life or beyond this life. And so, I mean, I think that's where I'd leave my first answer, is that by studying these phenomena, reincarnation, dreams, hypnosis, it reveals to us a variety of different cultural perspectives on life and death and rebirth.
So, doctor, views. So, over to you now.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up, Sarah.
Loyd, sir, over to you now.
Okay.
You may speak.
Okay, sure. So, dreams and reincarnation, hypnosis, all of that does fall into how we connect to phenomena of consciousness within parapsychology. I have done a lot of work in psychic dreaming, looking at those particular types of dreams, but I also come from an anthropological approach, as Mike does. That's my undergraduate background as well, and I've taught courses in that. And looking at the content of dreams, specifically when they seem very, very different than, the typical fantasy dreams or even kind of a day residue dreams that come through, we do find connections that people have where ESP, extrasensory perception, is actually pulling information in without these folks actually knowing anything about it. Sometimes this connects with reincarnation, with dreams of past lives, but we kind of approach those cases very, very differently. And we have kind of a unique relationship within our field with hypnosis. It is a tool that we use from time to time, but it doesn't necessarily help us with the evidence for anything, whether it's life after death or just psychic abilities in general.
Do you think Sarah's still there?
I don't know. I think we lost her.
Yeah, she's gone from my screen.
Yes. So maybe Shinjan, maybe you should take over.
Yeah.
No, I also can't see her. Should we wait for her for 2 minutes?
Not if we're live. I think there are people watching. They're waiting for.
I think. Sure. Let's get going. Yeah,
comes.
I think she. Yeah.
I'm here. Please, let's continue, please.
Oh, sure.
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. I will be talking from a different approach, obviously, coming from a background in clinical psychology. Definitely, dreams, hypnosis, reincarnation, in one way or the other, are different and related. If I look at it from a Jungian perspective, I mean, there's one of the very important theorists, Carl Jung. And if we look at from a Jungian perspective, there's a concept of collective unconscious and a concept of archetypes, where basically our unconscious does hold a lot of information from the past lives and all. So the thing is that dreams, not only, I mean, if we look at dreams in a way, we do talk about dreams from a very Freudian perspective, that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. But if you bring Jung into the aspect, so there is a very important concept of unconscious known as collective unconscious, taking into account past lives. So maybe I can put it in this way, that dreams are the royal road not only to the unconscious in the present life, but might also be a royal road to the unconscious consisting of information from the past life. So in that way, dreams can actually bring into account a lot of memories, lot of little bit snippets from past lives. Hypnosis, I don't know. I will definitely agree with Loyd that the concept of past life regression, scientifically, I don't know how much we actually can verify it. I'm not that now also with a little bit of experience, I'm not still very convinced with it. But definitely there are accounts where past life regression and hypnosis does have brought into account a lot of memories, a lot of past life events from it. But I think we need more research, more account on that to come up with a very strong evidence that hypnosis can be related to reincarnation. But talking about dreams, definitely highly related.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insightful views. Now I would like to begin with our Q&A segment. The first question is for Dr. Mikel Burley. Sir, how do the Jataka tales address the interplay between karma and rebirth, and what insights could be gained from using dreams and hypnosis to explore past life memories in this context?
Yes, thank you for the question. Well, the Jataka tales are ancient tales from the Buddhist tradition, and they involve stories about lives that are attributed to the Buddha, previous lives before he became Siddhartha Gautama, and thus the Buddha in that lifetime. And these stories are used sometimes to teach different sort of moral lessons, and the collection of stories as a whole certainly is used to support the concepts of karma and reincarnation within the Buddhist traditions. And often these lifetimes, the stories about them are used to illustrate how the Buddha in one or other of these previous lives was cultivating certain qualities, virtues. And so, for example, qualities of compassion and generosity. And so there's certainly a strong link with the doctrine of karma, because there is this sense conveyed through the Jataka stories that by cultivating particular virtuous qualities in one lifetime, those qualities can be carried over to subsequent lifetimes, and hence one is building up a sort of virtuous character over multiple different lifetimes. I mean, I think there are lots of connections between those stories and dreams and the phenomenon of hypnosis, although some of the connections might be more tenuous than others. But when I'm reading the Jataka stories, I certainly get the sense of they're rather dreamlike. Some of the stories involve previous lives of the Buddha as a prince or as some other kind of human being, but some of them are animals. And so there's this idea of sort of undergoing rebirth, cycles of reincarnation through different life forms, including animals and sometimes heavenly beings or such like. And that strikes me as being quite dreamlike, sort of got that sort of imaginative link, taking on different forms of life and so on. And then I would make the connection with the phenomenon of hypnosis and perhaps the whole notion of hypnotic regression by drawing I suppose, noting the similarity between some forms of meditation and hypnosis. Now, one has to be careful before making that comparison too close, because certainly some proponents of meditation would want to draw a sharp distinction between hypnosis and meditation. But in my view, there are forms of meditation that are quite similar to hypnosis, especially forms of self-hypnosis. And there are meditation practices within Buddhist traditions and elsewhere that are specifically designed to cultivate an ability to understand one's previous lives, to have access to those previous lives. And one sees this sort of paradigmatically in the stories of the Buddha's own enlightenment experience, his awakening experience, where he is said to have come to understand and remember his previous lives, and also to discern connections between the lifetimes of other beings through their karmic, the sort of carryover from one lifetime to another of the karmic consequences. And so if one thinks that one can access previous lives or even imaginings of previous lives through hypnotic processes, then I think there is certainly a connection with meditation practices to that extent.
Thanks a lot, sir. It was an incredible answer. Loyd, sir, I would now like to ask you that it would be wonderful if you share with us some of your notable cases of apparitions discussed in your book, A Paranormal Casebook, Cases from a Parapsychologist's First 25 or So Years.
Sure. So we define an apparition as consciousness without, I guess, after death. So typically, we do have cases going back over 100 years of people who are projecting out of their body and are seen by other people. We call those apparitions of the living typically. But of course, most people love to talk about apparitions or ghosts as some form of existence after the death of the body. We typically find that apparitions are pretty rare compared to the number of people who die, and they tend to be within anywhere from 24 hours to maybe a week. It's pretty rare to go much longer than that. But there are cases, such as ones I've written up in my book and other places, where there's kind of consistent existence with multiple witnesses. So one of those cases is an aircraft carrier, a retired aircraft carrier that's here in the San Francisco Bay Area, called the USS Hornet. It was the lead ship in the Pacific Fleet, starting in 1943 after the previous USS Hornet had been sunk by the Japanese. And they only opened as a museum in 1998. In fact, the ship was in a shipyard about to be destroyed before it was brought down to Alameda, California for kind of an event where they were closing the air base at that point. A foundation came, saved the ship essentially, and then the work with volunteers to clean up the ship to open as a museum began. And that's when the ghosts started showing up. The apparitions were seen. It started with a couple of the volunteers who occasionally saw an officer, a couple of sailors here and there, but typically they saw them together. In other words, there was more than one person in most instances who were seeing the apparitions. It became over time, and after the ship opened and more people came in, both as visitors and also as workers, docents, tour guides, people for the foundation, more and more instances of seeing sailors and officers and describing them very accurately and seeing that they reacted to the living as well, which is a key element for us for apparitions, to the point where we were able to identify only three different people, three different folks in the Navy who had lived before, two of whom for sure died in civilian life after the ship was decommissioned. So it's not like they died on the ship. That's a kind of a stereotype and a misconception that ghosts only haunt where they died. And that's actually not true. Those two actually were, one of whom was pretty important, but there have been over 50 descriptions of sailors and officers we can't identify because the ship at any one time had over 3,000 people on, men on the ship. And we don't have a way of identifying them unless they were to give us their identity in that sense. So very, very interactive. It's usually visual. There are occasional auditory experiences that people have. One of the most interesting experiences happened with 12 of the volunteers who came down off the flight deck during Christmas time. They had been kind of up there celebrating a little bit. And they saw a man in a 1940s Navy peacoat run into the Christmas tree in the middle of the hangar bay with no other exit that was there. There was also an instance of a former Navy SEAL taking a potential sponsor on a tour. They both saw an officer who acknowledged them. He disappeared. That officer disappeared as well. So we have many, many situations, and this continues to this day since 1998. It's very, very not. I wouldn't say it's common to have an experience like that, but lots of people, myself included, have had experiences on the ship. Another one, just really quickly, is a long-term experience I've had, or research. I've been doing investigations with this place. It's a restaurant south of San Francisco called the Moss Beach Distillery, and I've been going there since '91. And there have been witnesses who have seen a woman dressed in a blue dress who apparently was murdered on the beach below the restaurant. It's on the coast of California since the early 1930s. And over time, there were people who would come in who had no idea the place was haunted. In fact, most people didn't know it was haunted until maybe 1980s at that point. And then a couple of the owners have had significant experiences with that apparition interacting with them, including physically providing some situations for them, some effects. That actually happened with myself over time, where we would have things start moving for us. Kind of a request. We kind of made friends with the ghost in that sense. Also, the first time I was there with the Japanese medium for Japanese television. She had a long conversation with the ghost, including advising her on how she could change her clothing. And the next thing I heard, without any of the staff knowing anything about this, was that the woman they had been seeing before was now wearing a black cocktail dress instead of that traditional 1930s blue clothing. So those are just a couple of examples of kind of longer term haunts by these apparitions, conscious apparitions. I have many, many other stories, including a couple of personal encounters as well.
My goodness, thank you so much for sharing such interesting cases. Even your personal cases, it was like, whoa. Next question is for Shinjan sir. Sir, would you like to share with us your invaluable thoughts on how hypnosis helps individual overcome phobias, traumas, or other psychological barriers? Can hypnosis reveal information about past lives that influence current behaviors and beliefs?
Yeah, but one thing we need to understand at first that hypnosis, I mean, if you look at modern hypnosis, definitely hypnosis has passed the test of time, from coming to mesmerism to James Braid to Ericksonian hypnosis to modern hypnotherapy. The thing we need to understand is that hypnotic state is something which has been found to be very beneficial for any kind of psychotherapy. The reason being, if we look at the mind from the theories of hypnosis, I'll just quickly get into two concepts. One is that with hypnosis or with hypnotic trance or induction, which we talk about, getting the person to a hypnotic trance, what happens is that we activate the right hemisphere of the mind more than the left. And this right hemisphere deals more with our imagination, our creative parts. And this imagination helps us, in doing wonders. That is one thing. Another thing is that with hypnotherapy, it has been seen that we have a lot of brain waves going on, coming to beta, delta, alpha, theta, gamma. There's one wave known as the theta wave, which can be activated during the hypnotic stage. And this theta wave is better for suggestibility and better for, like putting in suggestions to the mind. Now, why are we talking about suggestions and everything? The thing is that in any kind of mental health disorder, what happens is that a lot of time we know things from a surface level, but those things don't enter the subconscious and therefore doesn't influence change in behavior or a change in action or a change in belief thought patterns. The reason being that according to the concept of hypnosis, we have a conscious mind, we have a subconscious, we have an unconscious mind, which is a known thing. But there is one difference. We have a critical factor in between the conscious and the subconscious mind. This critical factor actually stops the information from entering the subconscious. Whatever information are not very habitual, it tries to remove it from entering the subconscious. So basically what hypnosis does is that it opens up that door to the subconscious by moving the critical factor. So in any case, be it a phobia, be it an anxiety disorder, be it a OCD, be it a depression, through a hypnotic trance, we can make the person get into a stage where whatever psychotherapeutic intervention we are doing, maybe at a behavioral level, preferably at a thought level, that is more working because it is entering the subconscious pretty easily. So that is how actually, the hypnosis or hypnotic state works good for any kind of therapy. We see a lot of research with hypnosis-based cognitive behavior therapy. And nowadays we are having a lot of research on that. I do for my own clients have a lot of time. I have, used hypnosis as an adjunct to acceptance and commitment therapy. And I've seen that it worked better. At an experiential level, it really worked better. Now, that is the answer to your first question. Coming to the second question, as I was saying in my first answer, that does hypnosis bring into aspect from past lives? Again, I will say yes, there are definitely research on that. But if you ask my own opinion, I am more into past age regression rather than past life regression. What I call about age regression is getting back to a past age or getting back to a past time. We have concepts known as inner child therapy. That is also something we can do through hypnosis. And what I'm saying, little example, just taking 2 minutes, is that I'm giving an example of my first case maybe. My first time I used hypnotherapy, I mean a very proper setup. I was dealing with a case where a person was having an existential obsession. It means that the person was having a lot of intrusive thoughts about why it is important to live, why is it important to do any work. At the end of the day, we will die, everybody will forget us, we will forget everything. And this intrusive thoughts are going on and on and on, and the person was having a lot of trouble with that. The person was not being able to function. So one day I just got to know that this person had a grandfather who had dementia. And it striked because, the person had Alzheimer's dementia, which deals a lot with memory issues. And this person had been telling me that we will forget, we will forget, we will forget. So I was like, maybe there is a connection, memory, forget, memory, forget. So I took her to past age regression. I took her 4 years before to that particular day when she met her grandfather for the last time. And you know, I felt at the same time anxious and very happy at the same time because doing this past age regression, at one point of a time, she started crying heavily. And when we took her back to the present state, she said that she never knew she loved her grandfather so much and she missed him so much. It was all there. She couldn't cry because she wanted to be with her mother. And just because she didn't want her mother to cry, she wanted to be that, that strong person. And she never let her emotions go out. And when that emotions got released through that, and she, got that insight of all those things, eventually those obsessional thoughts started, getting less and getting reduced. So yes, I am a preacher of past age regression. Age regression, I've done a lot, and I think it's wonderful. But past life regression, I think I will get into that after more research, not now.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. So that was very fascinating and warm also. Getting back to this now second set of the questions. Michael, sir, related to your thought-provoking paper, Conundrums of Buddhist Cosmology and Psychology, would you like to share with us about how dreams and hypnosis contribute to the relationship between psychological and cosmological aspects of rebirth in Buddhist tradition? And what insights can they provide into the interplay between mental states and literal descriptions of spatio-temporal regions in these traditions?
Well, yes. I mean, I can certainly say a little bit about that paper of mine that you've cited. I also wanted to try and make a connection with what Shinjan was just saying there about past age regression. Not a major point on my part, but just to note that the sort of form of meditation that I was referring to earlier, where it's sort of geared towards gaining knowledge of previous lives, it normally takes the form of starting by recollecting events in one's current life and sort of tracing further back towards one's childhood, and then of going beyond that, back into the womb and back into previous lives. But it certainly involves it involves that remembering of childhood and so on. So I think there are. I mean, I suppose that's the point I was making before, which is that there are indeed similarities between certain Buddhist meditation practices on the one hand and certain forms of hypnosis on the other. Maybe the difference, one of the major differences, is between meditation and the forms of hypnosis that involve someone else being involved. Somebody giving hypnotic suggestions. Meditation typically doesn't involve that, but there are guided meditations that are very similar to that. But coming back to this issue of that paper of mine called Conundrums of Buddhist Cosmology and Psychology, the main theme I was exploring in that was I was sort of looking at different interpretations of especially the idea of different rebirth realms in which one might be reborn according to Buddhist traditions. And what we find are very roughly, I mean, there's overlap between them, but roughly 3 different forms of interpretation. And maybe it's a matter of emphasis rather than strict difference. But there's what we might call the cosmological form of interpretation, where you've got this idea of there being different realms into which one may be reborn. It's typically either 5 or 6 different realms. And so these would include things like heavenly realms and hell realms, the realm of the so-called hungry ghosts, and the human realm and the animal realm as well. And so to understanding those cosmologically would be roughly understanding them as sort of spatiotemporal locations, spheres into which one might be reborn. But then there's another kind of interpretation which places the emphasis much more on the psychological. And indeed, at the extreme end of that interpretation, it would be that there's no such thing as sort of reincarnation or rebirth in what we might say a literal sense, but rather what is referred to by the different realms of rebirth are the sort of mental states, especially emotional states, that we find ourselves in within a single lifetime. So if one is experiencing trauma, maybe rage or aggression, then one might think of oneself as being in a state of hell. And if one's experiencing pleasure and joy and delight and so on, then one might put that in terms of being in a heavenly space, a heavenly realm, a heavenly state of mind. And then, likewise for other of the realms. And then the third form of interpretation is one that tries to synthesize or sort of combine elements of those previous two. And that was the real sort of focus of my paper, just trying to figure out what that third interpretation might be. And the closest I got to sort of making sense of it was to think about it in terms of different sort of periods of time we might think of. So it's not as though there's a necessary incompatibility between the psychological and the cosmological, because one might think that within a single lifetime one can indeed legitimately speak about being in a state of hell at one point and being in other states, maybe sort of heavenly states at other points. But it would be reductive to think of that in purely emotional terms or purely sort of self-oriented individualistic terms, because when one does find oneself in a really traumatic state of mind, maybe in a prolonged state of depression or something like that, then it's as though the whole world around one has changed as well. It's not as though it's simply me, but my whole perception of the world, my engagement with others has also undergone a transformation. So that in itself is broadening it out from the psychological to something more, we might loosely say, existential, ontological, something more worldly. But then on a longer time span, it's not that interpretation is not inconsistent with the idea that one may indeed be reborn subsequent to this life in a state that reflects the emotional states or the psychological or the existential, as I've just called them, sort of existential states that have been prevalent in one's previous life. So if one isn't careful, this is I'm not a Buddhist myself, but if one was speaking from a Buddhist sort of perspective, one might say that if one is not careful to cultivate the right kinds of state of mind in the current life, then there's a risk, there's a danger that one might carry those states over, or the negative states over, into subsequent lives, and those states may well predominate within one's subsequent lifetimes. So that's a bit of a summary of some of the themes I was exploring in that paper. There's perhaps more I could say about potential connections with hypnosis and dream states, but that's probably enough for that answer. If there's time at some point, Sarah, I would be interested to hear from Loyd a little bit more about those phenomena of apparitions. And are you frozen on my screen, Sarah? So I'm not sure whether you're hearing me. But
I'm here. I'm audible. Yeah.
You can. Obviously, I don't want to interrupt the flow of the discussion here. But if there is time, I'd be really interested to hear whether these apparitions are mistaken or ever mistaken for physical human beings. And if they're not, then what are the kind of phenomenological differences between encountering an apparition and encountering a physical human being? Because the kind of maybe the assumption, maybe the caricature would be that the apparitions are somehow partially translucent or transparent, rather. They're not fully physically embodied as we might encounter a physical human being. But I don't know, that's beyond my experience. So I'd be really interested to hear if there's time.
I would really wish Loyd sir to actually answer Mike sir's question. It's actually very interesting, and I'm pretty sure the audience would be intrigued too.
Sure. Well, first, the answer is yes, they're normally seen as solid 3D figures, although on occasion they're only seen down to about their knees, like above or below the knees. And there's a reason for that. And the reason for that we find is that when living people imagine themselves or visualize themselves, it's pretty rare for people to think of themselves all the way down to their feet, unless they happen to buy a lot of shoes. So little fashion sense. On the Hornet, the case I mentioned before, many people who witnessed these ghosts initially, until it kind of got around that there were no Navy personnel on the ship during the cleanup, they thought they were seeing actual solid people until they vanished. Mm. So that was very, very clearly, they were fully formed, fully visual, kind of straight through in terms of not being translucent. But this is all not that they are, the stereotype is that they somehow manifest themselves out of ectoplasm or something else. And the reality is that it's a psychic phenomena, in that the witness actually is perceiving something that has no optical visual characteristics. Hmm. So the consciousness of that apparition is somehow connecting with the consciousness of the witness, giving them the perception that is visual. Because we also have olfactory apparitions, we have auditory apparitions, and combinations thereof as well. There are, of course, occasional situations where people witness that translucent figure, and even some where it seems that one person will see a formless shape, another person will actually see the fully formed 3D shape. And that we think that has to do with the receptivity of that individual, not the apparition themselves. I mean, when it's talking about the apparition at the Moss Beach Distillery changing her clothing, it's because she was advised to change her perception of self to include that visual.
Yeah.
Another case,
very interesting.
The bar. Yeah. I don't know if you want me to say any more, but I did have one other case in which an apparition of the bartender owner, he died at the place, very, very popular with people. It was a bar and restaurant, and a week after his death, the regulars were seeing him, which didn't count for us as far as witnesses go. But people coming into the restaurant would comment on this guy sitting in the corner of the room, kind of waving at them as they came in. He was playing two-handed poker, which is something that the man did when he was alive on his breaks. And eventually, one of the new owners, actually, who was a police officer, a law enforcement person, he didn't believe in ghosts. So he got photos of that gentleman and others and started doing what's called a mug book, basically showing these pictures to witnesses. And every time people picked out Tony.
Yep. But if one was to photograph the apparition, then it wouldn't come out, no?
Yeah, I mean, that we keep getting asked about where the pictures were, the videos, but it's not an optical phenomenon. No. So, they don't reflect light. Otherwise, everybody would see them. There's a lot of really weird misconceptions and different lore from around the world that certain people's eyes are better. But it's pretty clear that's not the case from our research.
Thanks a lot, sir. I would just like to ask you, I would just like to ask Loyd, sir, quickly about your book, Psychic Dreaming. If you could quickly go through, what are the unresolved mysteries surrounding psychic dreams that continue to intrigue researchers and practitioners. If any incident you could share, it would be great.
Sure. In parapsychology, there has been research in dream telepathy and also looking at precognitive dreams quite a bit. So dreams of the future. The really interesting thing is that people who have these kinds of dreams, where the information that they get in their dreams, it actually is recalled much better. And the weird thing is, when you start asking people about how they knew it was a psychic dream, sometimes it's because the event comes true. They don't know until after the event. But generally, the response is, this dream felt realer than real. It felt different. I just knew it related to actuality, not just the reality in my dream state. So the mystery for us is, and we have an idea of why this is. We do know that being able to get information without the use of the senses, extrasensory perception, does happen in different altered states of consciousness. The dream state is a state in which our beliefs, our barriers to being psychic, drop completely. There's no rules in that state. So it is an altered state in which psychic information can be more readily accepted or at least noticed in some respects. Then again, you have the issue of dream recall in general, which confounds that to some extent. So for us, the mystery we've got is, how do we bring this out? How do we help people with the recall of these particular dreams? And can we actually show that they're picking up the future or a future, and can we actually alter that? And the answer to that last question is, it does seem that we can alter what people pick up, but then we're not even sure if they're picking up the future in that case.
It's a little uncertain,
Yeah.
but
I'll
certain.
say with
It's a
past
little
life dreams,
paradoxical. Yeah.
it's all paradoxical. We do look at dreams of past lives. People have those, and also dreams where apparent apparitions come in. Those are called visitation dreams. The problem with past life dreams is there's often not enough detail for us to determine whether that was an actual past life or something that they conjured up, a story that they needed to. Shinjan was talking about the validity of hypnosis and how helpful it is. Past life regression therapy is highly recommended for people. It's a really good form of therapy, because whether the story they're telling, that past life, is an actual past life or just something they need to bring out to talk about their issue, it's very helpful to the individual and to the hypnotherapist in working with them.
Exactly. Uh, Talking about dreams, Shinjan sir, I would like to ask you this question. It would be great if you share with us about how recurring dreams reflect unresolved psychological conflict or unresolved issues from our waking life. Can understanding their symbolisms provide deeper insights into our subconscious mind and emotional well being?
Sir, one of the very interesting part of this panel discussion, which I'm really enjoying, is that uh, different integrative perspectives coming together to explain one very important phenomenon. Yes, talking from a very from a clinical perspective into dreams. See, dreams serve two main purposes. One, wish fulfillment, and the other is definitely bringing into conscious what is there in the unconscious, but usually in a disguised manner. The thing is that our unconscious does hold a lot of information, a lot of memories, desires, instincts, and all, which are some of those are thought to be not very socially appropriate. Some are thought to be some are thought to be provoking. Some are thought to be emotionally provoking to a person. So there are two processes known as condensation and substitution, through which our unconscious elements are disguised in a very interesting form, and in the form of different symbolization or symbols are sent to the dreams. Now, the concept is that when we are having a lot of recurring dreams, it does show that there is there is some kind of an unresolved conflict, unresolved trauma, and any kind of an unresolved issue, for which it might be that we don't have a proper closure to. It can be that we don't have a proper insight to, and definitely it is something which is significant to us, which has affected us, and we have not been able to, deal with it in a proper way. Rather, we have suppressed or repressed it. So, a recurring dream does take into account a very important inner issue or a very important unconscious issue there in the person. Am I audible? Because every screen is freezed to me.
You are audible, sir. You're
Okay,
audible.
okay. So that is one of the things that, and there are research done by Bush, there are research done by Freud himself, which have also said that there is a chance that if we recall dreams in a very vivid manner, there are a lot of people who recall recurring dreams in a very vivid manner. There is a chance that what you are recalling might not be the exact element in your unconscious. Because if you are really recalling them very properly, there is a chance that your mind has disguised them in a very interesting way. So your mind, to a certain extent, like your mind is saying that, I understand that it has been disguised well. You won't be able to understand the exact reality of it. So you keep remembering it. It's kind of like that. It's more like your mind wants to keep you safe, but eventually you might not get happy with that. So I'm just giving, ending with a particular example of a recurring dream. I had a client who had a recurring dream of she coming out of a house, moving right side straight to a particular road where there was four roads coming to a junction. At that particular portion, there was a banyan tree. From the banyan tree, she used to again go right. And when she was going right, there was a lot of noises, lot of sounds. She couldn't understand what those sounds and those screams and those noises were about, but she started becoming very uncomfortable. She started having a lot of agitation. She started having a lot of, bodily discomfort. And eventually that started, working as a nightmare, and she used to wake up. And this was very recurring to her. This used to happen like thrice or four times in a week. So we started working on that, understanding her usual life history, case history, and all those things. And very interestingly, we came at an understanding. The particular road she used to take to the banyan tree is known to her. It's basically the road which is there outside her home. Now, the banyan tree is not there outside her home, but used to be there outside the house of her ex-boyfriend, with whom she had a very problematic relationship at a point of time. Now, the right side road from the banyan tree is again a new thing. Now, when we started, dealing with it from a very, like an experiential manner, we started understanding that the pillars which are there in the right side and the left side of that road are similar to her school road, the road she used to take to enter her primary school. And we later understood that the screams were basically the children or her classmates who used to bully her and beat her during her primary education. And she could never tell it to her parents because her parents were not emotionally available to her. Now, when we just, got everything together, there is a school element, there is a relationship element, all coming together in a kind of a hodgepodge. And definitely it was making her feel very bad during the recurring dreams. But what the mind might be trying to protect was the exact trauma memories. The mind was not giving her the exact trauma memories, but disguising it into a kind of an integrative shell. So when we slowly, explode that, we let that thing come to the conscious. We worked on that at a conscious level, at a trauma level. What happened, interestingly, that she was not having that dream again. Why? There's again a theory behind it. When you understand at a conscious level what is the exact unconscious meaning of a dream, the dream might not come. Because that dream, the mind knows that you have already decoded it. But I'm not saying that that particular thing might never come in a different symbolic way. It might come. But that exact dream has a high chance of not coming. So that is one perspective of looking at it. There are multiple perspectives of looking at dream. That is just one perspective. But yes, the kind of school of psychology I belong to, that is the perspective which I will, preach in this little conversation.
Thanks a lot, sir. It was incredible. I would now like to quickly go through the third set of questions, and the question is for Mikel, sir. Given the emphasis on rebirth beliefs, karma, and the ethical and religious significance in your paper titled Rebirth and the Stream of Life, how do dreams and hypnosis contribute to the understanding of past life memories? And what role do they play in validating or challenging the concept of reincarnation in various religious traditions?
Yeah, thanks. Well, it was a book of mine that had the title "Rebirth and the Stream of Life." Within that book, I didn't directly examine the phenomena of dreams and hypnosis, but there certainly are things that I could say about the relation between those and rebirth or reincarnation beliefs. One thing that comes to mind is, again, in the Buddhist tradition, more specifically Tibetan Buddhism, the practice that's often known as dream yoga, which, to put it simply, is sort of cultivating the ability to remain aware and conscious in some sense within one's dreams. So that phenomenon is also known as lucid dreaming. And there are many purposes of the practice, but one of the purposes is I suppose the central purpose is to develop a greater control would not be an illegitimate term to use, a sort of greater control over one's mental states, over one's conscious states, and including one's dreams. And so if one becomes lucid within the dream, then it's often the case that one is able to have more control over the phenomena that one's encountering, experiencing within the dream, and also to gain that sense of a certain sense of the unreality of the phenomena that one is encountering. And from this particular sort of Tibetan Buddhist perspective, that's something, that's an ability, a capacity that can be carried over into one's ordinary waking life, to, I suppose, one could say, to enhance a certain mode of detachment or non-attachment to the phenomena that surround one, not to attach an undue level of significance to the various experiences one undergoes. But bringing it back to, I suppose, rebirth, reincarnation, and so on, another purpose of the sort of lucid dreaming practice, the dream yoga, is preparation for death, preparation for one's death in this lifetime, because it's believed that if one dies without having developed a certain degree of control over one's conscious states, then one will be out of control when one leaves the physical body, or one's physical body dies, and one will be just enter into states that are perhaps completely beyond one's understanding. Whereas if one's developed certain abilities through deep meditative practices, and including this sort of lucid dreaming practice, then one may well be able to remain alert and aware after one's physical death, and one enters into these some other sort of realm of existence, what's known as the bardo realm, between one physical incarnation and another. And within that state, one can have some degree of control over the phenomena that one is encountering, and thereby reduce any trauma that one might undergo in those situations, and also just remain in a calmer state of mind, thereby contributing towards a more auspicious rebirth next time. So, I mean, there's a lot to it, and there's a lot more that would need explaining and articulating than I've given in that quick summary, to get a grasp of what's going on. But it's a very intriguing area of sort of intersection between these different phenomena, especially dream and rebirth belief and meditation and so on. I think I'd struggle to bring in a direct connection with hypnosis, other than just repeating what I've said before, which is that certain hypnotic states are quite similar to states that are developed through meditation practices. So no doubt, hypnosis could play a part in that kind of practice too. But very, very, very interesting areas of connection, I think.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, sir. It was incredible. Sir Loyd, sir, I would like to ask you the next question. As the president of Rhine Research Center, please share some scientific evidence or evidences that validated the psychic dreaming or secrets of reincarnation.
Well, briefly, for psychic dreaming, I think that the best source of information right now, with some of the initial experiments conducted by Stanley Krippner and Montague Ullman, in a book called Dream Telepathy. It was done at Maimonides Medical Center 50 years ago. In fact, they just put out the 50th anniversary edition of Dream Telepathy. There is additional research that's been done by others since then, of course, including looking at lucid dreaming and psychic abilities in general. The reincarnation thing is really interesting. In 1960, Dr. Ian Stevenson at the Medical School at University of Virginia, started looking into children who remember previous lives spontaneously, not without hypnosis whatsoever. And he determined that adults under regression, the problem is that we do have a lot of information in our unconscious, and as soon as the hypnotherapist says, go back before your birth, that's a suggestion that may bring out a story. But then when you try to fact check the story, there's not enough detail or the wrong details that don't support that. Children 2 to 4 years old, which is typically the age range this happens, spontaneously talking about a past life. That is a really interesting phenomenon. He and others started looking in places like India and Burma, Thailand, Lebanon, places where there were reports being made. It's only been fairly recently that in the Western world, in the US and other countries, Germany, places like that, that there have been cases being reported, often because parents, if they're especially Christian fundamentalists, may go in a different direction when they hear the child talking about that past life. So they determined over years, it was Stevenson, Jim Tucker, who took over from Stevenson after his death. Jim is actually going to be retiring. Someone else will be taking over. But folks at the University of Virginia, the University of Iceland, and a few other places have been working together looking at these cases, which often, but not always, provide extreme detail. So imagine a 2.5-year-old speaking like an adult with an increased vocabulary, rarely with other language, but sometimes with other language involved as well. And that child can talk about their previous life, how they died, where they lived. And then the researchers have a couple of issues they have to deal with. The main one being, is there any other source of information this child could have? So in the modern world, is this somebody on the internet that the kid's parents may have been researching? Did the child see something in the background on television? There's all sorts of ways we have to kind of separate that out. But looking for and solving the case with investigation of who that was, and even to the point of contacting the previous family and seeing if things match in terms of personality, likes and dislikes, food allergies that often really kind of refer back to the allergies or food likes and dislikes of the previous personality. And in a percentage of cases, there is an unusual birthmark on these children that when doing research on the mode of death of that previous personality directly connects. So there might be, for example, a birthmark looking like a burn around the child's throat. And it turned out that the previous personality was hanged. There was one case that Erlander Haraldsson of the University of Iceland talked about at a conference. I knew Erlander fairly well, where it was a child in India who actually had a big birthmark on her left side. And she remembered being a male who died about 2 years, I think it was 2 years before she was conceived. So it's usually a fairly short period between the death of the previous personality and the new person. And she was able to give enough information for her parents to drive her to another village a couple hundred miles away. She identified the street, she took them to the location. And then when the family came to the door, and when they knocked on the door, she could actually identify each one of those family members by name. So Haraldsson did a lot of work with that and actually even followed up. Typically, these children forget or start forgetting the past life around age 5 or 6, certainly by 7. But there are isolated cases where the child continues to remember. And this was one of them, where he went back when she was 12, and there was a relationship that had formed with the previous family and the current family, between the child, the parents, the child, and the previous family. He did an extensive amount of work trying to eliminate any other sources of contact or information and showed that there absolutely was none. There are a lot of similar cases like that. So for us in parapsychology, this is a consciousness-related phenomenon. We do not know if it is a psychic phenomenon, the way we think of psychic ability and such, because there is no other form of extrasensory perception, including really detailed remote viewing, that provides the kind of depth of information that comes from these children. And in fact, we have within parapsychology, we have materialists in our field too, who don't even accept any evidence of survival of bodily death or life after death as that. They look at it as evidence of ESP of the living. They still look at that and scratch their heads. It's the big mystery for us. We don't know if it's consciousness, soul, memory, what's actually happening there with these children. But we are seeing more and more cases coming out in the US, in the UK and other places which are being investigated, which is really good, because the more we have from various cultures, especially since they are so similar, the better, we'll have some sort of understanding, even though we may never get to what is reborn until we have the hard question in science answered, which is, what is consciousness?
Very interesting. It's very insightful. Absolutely enjoyed your answer, sir. Thank you so much. The last question, but not the least, is for Shinjan, sir. Sir, what ethical considerations arise when using hypnosis to explore past, or let's say age memories, whatever you're comfortable with, sir, and particularly in therapeutic settings, and how can these practices be responsibly conducted?
Yeah, sure. I would before getting into answer, I was really amazed by the way the previous answer by Loyd sir ended. That eventually, what is consciousness? Is it awareness? Is it existence? Because we see a lot of research, and I'm so happy that now a lot of research is happening. We have been, been so like what to say, so saturated by the concepts of conscious being nothing and unconscious being everything. But I think previously, when I look at the theories of Indian psychology, I really feel as an Indian that we don't market our concepts very well. I have seen a lot of Vedas and Vedant's concepts of Indian psychology. We are very bad at marketing, which I understood from reading them. We haven't marketed them, but they have actually spoke about the concept of consciousness as a very big thing, as in transcendental consciousness, phenomenal consciousness, which we don't. I have never studied in while I was studying psychology in my major and all. So yeah, that's I really loved your answer for that. Coming to the ethical consideration, Sarah, one of the very important thing about whenever I talk about ethical consideration is your understanding of your intention. Your intention is the most important thing when it comes to ethical consideration. Your client is the main person. You are not the main person. So here the main thing is that you should have a complete understanding. If you're using hypnotherapy, why are you using hypnotherapy? Is it just because you know hypnotherapy, you want to use it? Or is it because you really think that for this particular client, for this particular session, for this particular issue, hypnotherapy will help? What is the reason? You should have to be, clear about your purpose, rather than just going on a what we say like a Gen Z thing, going on a flex to show like a hypnosis. Not like that. So that is the first thing you have to understand. Second thing, what you need to understand is that every hypnosis at the end of the day can get into a self-hypnosis. So the thing is that the words you use, because at the end of the day, you are taking them to you are not making them sleep. It's not like what we used to see in a film, you are looking at this pendulum and now you are sleeping and you are like gone. It's not like that. It is a focused attention. It's a focused state of, narrowed consciousness, if we put it that. Like distracting all the other things. And if I put it in this way, at this present moment, if you are really very focused on me, I can say that you are in a trance, because you are not focused in any other thing. You are in a trance at this present moment. So in that way, my words, because I'm putting it into the subconscious, my words, my suggestions, my imaginations, whatever I'm making you, get into, I should have a very good understanding, awareness, and clarity about my words. Because at the end of the day, for a psychologist, the main tool, the main weapon is our words. I mean, rather are our words. So we have to be very clear about our words. That is the next point. So we have to, be in the process, need to practice it with each other so that we get into that thing. The third very important point is that if you're taking someone into hypnosis, you get them back. Particularly the kind of hypnosis I was talking about, like an inner child therapy, or talking about, like past age regression. If you're taking them to a past age, you bring them back to the present age. You don't leave them there. And when I say that, it's very important to be a professional when you're doing that. Because I can also relate to it. Like when I started hypnotherapy, and when at first, some of my first clients, when I was able to, get them into the past stage, and I was also not in a professional zone. I also got very excited. Oh my God, this is happening. Because as in Indian systems of psychology, hypnotherapy is not something which is very well taught. And in clinical psychology, hypnotherapy is one part of the syllabus which is less taught. So the thing is that when people like me who are into hypnotherapy, they are more of a self-taught and going from different schools of hypnotherapy, learning from different things. So we get very excited because we were not primarily trained with it. So that is another thing you need to be. You have to be a professional. You need to keep your calm and composition and composure, and you have to bring them back. That is the third very important thing. And finally, one of the very important ethical things is that I won't say that hypnosis is harmful or something like that. No, not at all. But definitely, as we are giving certain kind of suggestions, there are concept of post hypnotic suggestion as well. So, like a very very brief example. Suppose like I am making someone get into a hypnotic state of a relaxation, and to make that person practice that, suppose I'm grounding that relaxation with an anchor. Suppose I'm asking that person, whenever you're into that state, just bring your thumb and your forefinger, your index finger together, and you just make a circle. And that is the feeling you have. Now, this is something I made an association for that person at a subconscious level. So I have to be clear how I'm doing that so that it doesn't, affect them in a wrong manner. So these are certain things we need to focus on, and ending with it is not directly from the ethical point of view, but definitely a very important part of an ethical point of view is that if you're practicing something, you should practice it in a good manner. So the thing is that if you're practicing hypnotherapy, you should have a belief in that. You should have a confidence in that. Because the thing is that, when I was, talking about, past life regression. So the thing why I was saying that is that as I fail to achieve a complete belief in that, I don't practice that just because of that. When I will have a complete belief in that, I will practice that because I am not the most important thing. My client is most important. So as I am more confident in past states, therefore I practice that. It's not like disagreeing something. It's like waiting till I gain complete belief of that. So I think that is important. You should have that complete belief. And if you're not having that, don't say, a lot of time we say that we don't agree, so this is wrong. Not like that. If you don't agree, you read. You improve. And if you're having that clarity, you practice. So that is a little bits and pieces of what can be some kinds of ethical considerations. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. That's very interesting, fascinating. So this brings to an end to our thought-provoking session. Thank you, Dr. Mikel Burley, Mr. Loyd Auerbach, and Mr. Shinjan Ghosh for our very insightful conversation and for your valuable time this evening. Tell Me Your Story calls for submission on the writing prompt, Echoes and Whisper, which intends to explore various noises and conversations emerging from our internal and external hemispheres. Registration are also open for a host of workshops for new or aspiring authors. We hope to hear from you soon. Till then, stay safe, stay happy, have a good day, and good night.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Sarah, for being a wonderful host.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.